In this video, we'll show you how to replace the strut mount on your Subaru Baja. This is located in the front of the vehicle and on top of the strut. Let's get started. With the vehicle raised and supported, we can remove our lug nuts with a 19mm. If you can't remove the wheel, you can thread a lug nut back on halfway. And I'm going to use a dead blow hammer on the back side of the tire, trying not to strike the rim. And we can remove the wheel. We can remove the 12mm on the front side of the strut, holding our ABS wheel speed sensor on. Use a flathead screwdriver and get the ABS sensor off the strut. Moving to the back side of the strut, we have another 12mm bolt holding in our brake hose. Down at the bottom of the strut here, we have two 19mm to remove. I'm using a socket with a breaker bar on the back side to hold this, and then a 19mm socket on the front. Now we can go ahead and remove the bolts. If either of these bolts are stuck, there's a few different ways of getting these free. First thing you can try is get one of the nuts most of the way back on so that it's flush with the end. That way you don't mushroom the bolt. I'm just going to use a hammer. You don't want to be too aggressive with this because you don't want to damage these cam bolts. If you do, you'll need to get new ones. When you remove the cam bolts, you want to note which way the cam was facing so that you can reinstall that the same way that it came out. We can go ahead and separate the strut from the knuckle. You want to use a bungee around the control arm to keep the axle from pulling out of the transmission. We have three 12mm nuts up at the top of the strut. I'm just going to thread that first one back on a few threads. Now we can remove the nut from the upper portion of the strut and remove the strut from the vehicle. We'll be using a strut compressor like this. There's different types of strut compressors. We'll be using this kind. There's a cap up top. You want to remove that in order to get to your upper strut nut. I'm going to use some locking pliers down on the bottom of the spring on the strut. That'll hold that in place. Now we can start to compress the spring. Now you can release those locking pliers and make sure that the strut is loose. Just going to reinstall those. And we can remove our 17mm nut. You may need to decompress the spring just to put enough tension on the strut in order to be able to loosen the nut. Once you do that, you can go ahead and recompress the spring. We can remove the top hat. We'll get our new strut mount on. Get the nut started. We can start to snug that down. Once you get that started on, the strut may spin. And start to decompress the spring. As you decompress the spring, you want to make sure that the bottom of the spring is lining up with the strut body. With that decompressed a little bit more, we can snug that up the final little bit, and we can finish decompressing the spring. We'll remove the locking pliers. We'll torque the nut to 40 foot-pounds and reinstall the cap. Now that we have this fully decompressed, the spring is in its proper place in the strut. We can remove this from the spring compressor and get it back in the vehicle. Start to get the strut lined up with the upper portion of the strut tower. You want to be very careful of the ABS wire. Once the strut's lined up, you can start to get the first nut threaded on. And we can get all three of the upper strut mount nuts started. Make sure to remove the bungee cord or whatever you use to hold the knuckle in. We'll start to get the knuckle lined up into the strut. Remember the orientation from before that we had our upper camber bolt. And start to get that installed. The washer goes on the upper bolt. We'll get the nuts started on. We can snug those down. And we can torque these to 116 foot-pounds. We can get the ABS wheel speed sensor wire lined up on its bracket. Get the bolt started in. We'll just snug that up. We can get the brake hose lined up. Get the bolt started in, and we can just snug that up. Line up the lug studs with the holes in the wheel. I like to get the first lug nut threaded all the way in, and that'll hold the wheel on while I get the rest of the lug nuts threaded on. We can snug these down. Now we can torque these to 80 foot-pounds in a star pattern. With the vehicle at ride height, we can go ahead and tighten down the 3 upper bolts. And we'll torque these to 15 foot-pounds. Take the vehicle for a road test down to your local service station. Make sure you don't hear any abnormal noises, and you'll want to have them perform an alignment. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.